I built a snowman with my son, just a snowman, on our lawn. But to Karen, the president of our HOA, it was a violation. She didn't just send warnings, she didn't just trespass. She revved her SUV and drove straight through it. What she didn't know was what lay underneath. Not just snow, but steel, and a tree stump I'd warned the HOA about years ago. She thought she could bully us into obedience, but she ended up with a wrecked SUV, a neighborhood in revolt, and a snowman that refused to fall. This isn't just a story about winter. It's about power, about defiance, and what happens when a bully learns that not everything soft on the outside is weak inside. My name is James, and this is how a snowman helped me take down an HOA tyrant. The whole saga truly began with a lightning-scarred oak stump that refused to die. 3 winters earlier, a summer storm had rolled in from the west, like an angry artillery barrage. The sky turned the color of a fresh bruised wind screamed through the pines, and one single bolt, white-hot and deafening, struck the tallest oak in our front yard. The explosion shook the house so hard that Jack, then 7, dove under the kitchen table screaming for his mother. Clara had been gone 8 months by then, but in that moment, the thunder sounded exactly like her name. When the smoke cleared, the tree stood split down the middle half of it, sheared away as cleanly as if God himself had taken an axe to it. The lower third remained rooted deep, blackened, and utterly defiant. I paid a crew to haul away the fallen crown, but I left the stump. Something about it felt like a memorial. To the tree. To Clara. To everything that gets struck down and still refuses to fall. Every December since that stump vanished beneath a flawless white blanket. Delivery drivers, teenagers racing home, after curfew, and salt truck operators who took corners too fast never saw it until it was too late. After the second fender bender in as many years, I started jamming a 6-foot orange reflective pole straight into its heart the moment the first flakes stuck. The pole had saved at least 3 vehicles I knew of, probably more. No one ever rang my doorbell with cookies or a 6-pack. Instead, the year Karen Stapleton was elected president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, she mailed me a crisp $50 citation for erecting an unauthorized hazard marker in violation of Aesthetic Conformity Clause 4.2b. I wrote the check, stuck a yellow Post-it on it that read, "Merry Christmas, glad your husband's Lexus still has a front bumper," and mailed it back. She never cashed it. The canceled check now hangs in a cheap black frame on my garage wall, right between my welding certification and a faded photograph of Clara laughing on a pier in Virginia Beach, Jack balanced on her hip like a sleepy koala. My son Jack, 10 years old, freckles across his nose like cinnamon on oatmeal, and convinced he is one growth spurt away from becoming Captain America, never saw the stump as a hazard. To him, it was magic disguised as wood. One week it became a pirate ship's crow's nest, the next a knight's watchtower. And on especially epic afternoons, it served as the perfect launch pad for snowball barrages that could take down imaginary invading hordes at 25 yards. He had named the stump Old Thunder the first winter after the strike, and every year he greeted it like an old friend when the snow finally hid its scars. That particular winter, the snow arrived early and with attitude. It started the first week of December, thick wet flakes that fell straight down and stuck to everything like confectioner's sugar on wedding cake. Jack and I spent an entire Saturday outside, breath fogging in front of us, shovels scraping in rhythmic unison. We cleared the walk, the driveway, even the mailbox path for Mrs. Delgado next door because her hip had been acting up. By the time the sun dipped low and orange behind the bare maples, our gloves were soaked through, cheeks windburned, and noses running like faucets. Jack dropped his shovel, planted his boots wide, and looked up at me with that particular grin, half mischief, half dare that always meant trouble of the best kind. "Dad," he said, voice muffled slightly by the scarf Clara had knitted him the Christmas before she got sick, "we are building the single biggest, most legendary snowman this entire HOA has ever seen. Like record-breaking. Like they'll have to rewrite the bylaws because of us." I opened my mouth to say the responsible thing, "Karen will lose her mind. We'll get another letter. Let's just keep the peace." But the words stuck somewhere behind the lump in my throat. Because in that moment, with snowflakes catching in his eyelashes and the porch light flickering on behind us, he looked so much like Clara it hurt. She had been the one who never let the world's petty rules steal joy from a 10-year-old boy. She would have been out here until midnight packing snow and laughing. So instead I heard myself say, only if we put him right on Old Thunder. Make him taller than their stupid regulations allow. Jack let out a war whoop that echoed down the entire cul-de-sac and scared a flock of starlings into the darkening sky. We worked until our fingers went numb and the streetlights buzzed to life. The base alone was wider than our pickup's tire and heavier than sin. I muscled it up onto the stump where it settled with a deep, satisfying crunch perfectly anchored by the hidden roots below. From the garage, I dragged out everything I'd been saving for someday scrap rebar steel mesh from an old fence job. Even the bent mower blade that had survived 3 seasons of Bermuda grass and one unfortunate encounter with a sprinkler head. Jack watched eyes saucer round as I twisted the metal into an invisible skeleton deep inside the snow. It's not cheating, I told him, winking through the sting of cold on my cheeks. It's structural integrity. Sarge is going to stand until spring, whether Karen likes it or not. Jack's response was immediate and perfect. We're building a snowmech, Dad. A full-on frost giant with a titanium spine and zero respect for HOA presidents. By the time we finished, the temperature had plummeted and the sky was a hard indigo bowl of stars. We gave our creation coal eyes, scavenged from last summer's barbecue briquettes, a crimson scarf that had once been part of my army dress blues, and 2 black bottle caps that caught the streetlight like polished obsidian. Carrots were frozen solid in the crisper, so Jack insisted on a slightly sad banana we found at the bottom of the fruit bowl. It curved upward in a permanent sarcastic smirk. Under the sodium orange glow of the street lamp, our frost giant stood at least 7 feet tall, maybe 7.5 if you counted the patrol cap Jack jammed on at a jaunty angle. His shadow stretched clear across the cul-de-sac and halfway up the Hendersons' garage door. There was something undeniably watchful about him, scarf fluttering like a banner bottle cap eyes, reflecting passing headlights posture straighter and prouder than any snowman had a right to be. Jack stepped back, mittens on his hips, surveying our masterpiece like a general reviewing troops. What do we call him? I asked, voice low, with something that felt suspiciously like awe. Jack didn't even blink. Sarge, he declared, because he looks like he's already been through hell and is daring the world to try again. I laughed so hard my ribs ached, and the cold burned all the way to my lungs. Sarge it was. Later, after Jack had finally crashed, still fully dressed, except for boots sprawled across his bed, clutching a plastic army man, I poured myself a mug of cocoa spiked with a generous finger of bourbon and settled by the front window. Outside, the snow continued its silent assault, each flake catching the streetlight for a heartbeat before vanishing into the growing drifts. And there stood Sarge, motionless, unapologetic, a sentinel forged from childhood joy and adult spite. I raised my mug in a quiet salute. Welcome to the watch, soldier. Little did I know the enemy was already measuring angles in the dark. The first official declaration of war arrived at 7:12 the next morning, slid into our mailbox like a perfumed threat. No envelope, no stamp, just one sheet of heavy ivory cardstock, folded with surgical precision. The letterhead was embossed in gold foil, Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. The text was typed in cold perfect 12-point Times New Roman, the font of bureaucrats and divorce lawyers. Notice of violation. Regulation 7.14C. Seasonal decorations exceeding 48 inches in vertical height require written pre-approval from the board. Your unauthorized structure currently measures approximately 84-87 inches depending on drift. Immediate removal is required within 48 hours. Non-compliance will trigger daily fines of $50 and possible referral to the Compliance Subcommittee. Karen Stapleton, President, Maple Ridge, HOA. I read it 3 times, steam from my coffee curling around the words like angry ghosts. Then I laughed so hard, the mug nearly slipped from my frozen fingers. Jack came skidding into the kitchen in sock feet hair sticking up like he'd been electrocuted. What's so funny? I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, lips moving, then looked up with the pure, unfiltered outrage only a 10-year-old can muster. She measured him. His voice cracked on the last word. At night, in the snow with a tape measure. Woman's got commitment, I said, wiping my eyes. And a headlamp, apparently. Jack marched straight to the front window, pressed both palms and his nose to the glass, and bellowed loud enough to rattle the panes. Sarge is taller than your soul, Karen. Mrs. Delgado across the street peeked through her curtains and gave us a thumbs up. I pinned the notice to the refrigerator with the bald eagle magnet right next to Jack's latest report card. 3 A's, 1 B- in penmanship, and a teacher comment that read Jack has strong opinions and stronger volume. Jack immediately added his own artwork, a crayon masterpiece of Sarge stomping on a tiny navy blue SUV, while Karen fled in fuzzy pink slippers, tears streaming. Underneath in purple marker, property of the United States of Jack and Sarge. Word travels faster than salt trucks in Maple Ridge. By noon the next day, fresh snow had fallen again, wet, heavy, perfect for packing, and the neighborhood kids materialized like they'd been summoned by some ancient snowball pact. They came with phones raised, scarves flapping, parents trailing behind, pretending they weren't supervising. Someone hung an old Army patrol cap on Sarge's head at a rakish angle. Another kid produced a second scarf, bright Gryffindor red, and wrapped it like a victory sash. Jack took a fat black Sharpie and drew a row of campaign ribbons across the snowy chest, tiny hearts for bravery, lightning bolts for surviving Karen. Every selfie, every whoop, every snowball launched from behind Sarge's broad back felt like a middle finger wrapped in mittens. And Karen was watching. I caught her first on Tuesday afternoon. I was out salting the walk, the chemical crystals hissing against the ice, when her navy blue Lincoln Navigator eased past the cul-de-sac at exactly 8 miles per hour. Engine idling, wipers flicking lazily, heat shimmering off the hood. She didn't wave, didn't slow, just stared straight ahead at Sarge like he was a personal insult carved in ice. 5 full minutes she sat there, a dark silhouette behind tinted glass, breath fogging the windshield in slow, deliberate puffs. Then the SUV reversed with mechanical grace and vanished around the corner. That evening, after the streetlights buzzed on and the temperature dropped hard enough to make the snow squeak underfoot, I found the evidence, a perfect circle of boot prints around Sarge. Narrow, expensive tread, Italian leather, probably the kind that costs more per square inch than my mortgage payment. The prints were pressed deep as if their owner had stood in one spot for a long time, slowly pivoting, studying every angle. One set of prints stopped directly in front of Sarge's banana nose, close enough that whoever it was could have touched him. Jack crouched beside the track's flashlight beam, cutting through the dark. "Recon mission," he whispered, deadly serious. "She's casing the joint." I knelt next to him, the cold seeping through my jeans. "Let her case," I said. "She still doesn't get it." "Get what?" I pointed at the ground beneath Sarge's base, where the snow had been packed so tight it gleamed like marble. "He's not just standing on Old Thunder, buddy. He is Old Thunder. Roots run 20 feet in every direction. You'd need a backhoe and a court order to move him now." Jack's grin could have lit the whole block. "So basically, we built a fortress and called it a Snowman." "Exactly." We high-fived, mittens smacking together with a muffled thwop that echoed down the empty street. Inside, I poured 2 mugs of cocoa, extra marshmallows for morale, and we sat at the kitchen table, sketching battle plans on the back of Karen's violation notice. Jack wanted to add a Carrot machine gun turret. I suggested reinforcing the midsection with the old satellite dish I'd been meaning to recycle. We settled on both. Later, long after Jack was asleep, dreaming of frost giants and victory parades, I stood at the window again. The street was silent, except for the soft creak of ice expanding in the gutters. Sarge stood beneath the street lamp, like a lone sentry on night watch, scarf fluttering in the faint breeze, bottle cap eyes reflecting the moon in twin silver coins. I pressed my palm to the cold glass and felt the house settle around me, solid and warm and ours. Karen could measure all she wanted. She could circle and glare, and write her little letters until her manicured fingers bled ink. But some things, some people, some sons, some stubborn old oaks, and one very particular 7-foot frost giant simply refused to yield. And winter had only just begun. 2 days after the first notice, exactly on the morning of December 10th, a date I now remember the way soldiers remember the day they first heard incoming rounds, the second letter arrived. This one came in an actual envelope, heavy linen stock, hand-delivered while Jack and I were eating breakfast. I heard the soft slap of paper against the welcome mat, the faint crunch of expensive boots retreating down the salted steps, and I knew before I even opened the door. The envelope was sealed with a gold foil sticker shaped like the Maple Ridge logo, a stylized maple leaf wearing a crown because of course it was. Inside, the tone had escalated from polite hostility to barely veiled fury. Second notice. Escalated. Dear Mr. James Carter, despite the previous directive issued on December 8th, the unauthorized seasonal structure on your property remains in place. Current height now exceeds 92 inches, including recent additions of non-regulation scarves and headwear. Furthermore, close inspection has revealed the presence of non-decorative internal materials, metal rebar mesh, and what appears to be a lawnmower blade, creating an unapproved load-bearing construct that may constitute a liability hazard. Effective immediately, you are assessed a $150 fine, accruing weekly until full removal and restoration of the lawn to pre-storm condition. Failure to comply by December 14th will result in referral to the Compliance Subcommittee and potential legal remediation through the association's retained counsel. This is your final courtesy notification. Sincerely, Karen Stapleton, President, Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. I read it aloud at the table. Jack's spoon froze halfway to his mouth, Cocoa Puffs bobbing like tiny brown life rafts. She called Sarge a liability hazard, he whispered, as if the words themselves were cursed. She called him a lot of things, I said, folding the letter with deliberate slowness. None of them friendly. Jack's eyes narrowed. She's scared of him. Terrified, I agreed. Because the phrase that had snagged in my brain like barbed wire was non-decorative internal materials. Karen hadn't just measured from the street this time. She had come close enough to see the faint glint of rebar beneath the fresh powder we'd packed on yesterday. She had stood there in her designer coat, breath-fogging phone flashlight, cutting through the dark, cataloging every sin like a general mapping enemy fortifications. I turned to the window. Sarge stood proud under a thin new dusting of snow scarves, fluttering like regimental colors, banana nose curved in that permanent smirk. Sunlight caught the bottle cap eyes and threw twin sparks across the yard. He looked, there's no other word for it, heroic. Jack was already sketching again. This time, Sarge wore a cape made of caution tape and carried a shield shaped like Karen's violation notice. Do we have to take him down? He asked, voice small for the first time. I crouched, so we were eye level. Listen to me, buddy. Sarge is staying right where he is until the spring thaw personally asks him to leave. And even then, I'm pretty sure he'll tell spring to get lost. Jack's grin came back full force. Attaboy, Dad. That night, the temperature plummeted to 12 degrees. The kind of cold that makes your teeth ache and turns every breath into a dragon plume. I waited until Jack was asleep, then pulled on every layer I owned. Carhartt bibs, 2 hoodies, the balaclava Clara bought me the year we tried ice fishing and swore we'd never do it again. I carried a headlamp, a cordless drill with a fresh battery, a 5-gallon bucket of quick-set epoxy, and every remaining length of rebar in the garage. The plan wasn't a weapon, never that, but I was done pretending Sarge was fragile. Working by the red glow of the headlamp so I wouldn't wake the street, I drilled fresh holes straight through the packed snow and into the heart of Old Thunder. Each length of rebar slid home with a satisfying metallic thunk, like bolts sliding into a rifle. I poured epoxy into every void, watching it foam and harden, almost instantly in the cold. Then I wove steel mesh across the shoulders and chest, bending it with gloved hands until it disappeared beneath a final thick layer of snow Jack and I would pack on in the morning. When I stepped back, sweat freezing on my eyebrows, Sarge looked exactly the same from the street, cheerful, ridiculous, harmless. But inside he was now a fortress wrapped in a joke. As I packed up my tools, headlights swept across the yard, slow, deliberate, familiar. Karen's navigator again. This time she didn't even pretend to drive past. She stopped directly in front of the house, engine idling high beams, cutting through the dark like searchlights. For 30 full seconds, the light bathed Sarge in harsh white, turning every snow crystal into diamond dust. I stood in the open garage doorway, arms crossed, and stared straight into the glare. The high beams flicked off. The SUV reversed tires crunching and disappeared. Message received on both sides. Back inside, I poured a finger of bourbon, no cocoa this time, and opened the red folder I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside were 5 years of Karen's greatest hits, the certified letter about the window AC unit during a heat index of 108 degrees, the grass height citation measured to the quarter inch, the passive-aggressive forum post